Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Holly Randall Unfiltered, still in quarantine, obviously. Today, I have a very special guest and a very special announcement. My guest is Brooke Christian. She is the founder of Sexy as a Mother, which is a platform for sex and motherhood, two things that I think most people don't think about going together, but Brooke is all about that. So, Brooke, welcome.
Thank you.
Please tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so I run a platform, whatever you want to call it, a place where you can talk about sex and motherhood. Because what happens when you have a child, your sex life it goes nuclear, right? Like there are so many changes that happen in your world, in your relationship to yourself, like sex, your kids. It's just a bomb. And nobody really talks about that. But so many moms, I have yet to meet a mother that's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So like we all sort of understand that. And so, I write about that on my own blog and other blogs. I sell really high end curated sex toys that are selected with moms in mind, right? Like our needs are very different than someone who has 4 hours to like indulge their S&M and like do fire play. Like we don't have that kind of luxury. So, and I also sort of help moms understand that we can be sexy as moms. Like we can be sexy and moms at the same time. Like we can be two people, because what happens is moms go through an identity crisis. And those two women, the sexy woman and the mom, she can still be in you. So how do we navigate that? So it's a lot of tips and tricks and all that good stuff. I too have a podcast called Sexy as a Mother, where we talk to moms about all of these things. And sometimes I just pontificate on bad sex I had last night when my daughter walked in, like all of these kinds of things. But it's a forum for conversation about stuff that people don't really talk about.
So how old are your kids?
So I have a 10-year-old in 4th grade and a 6.5-year-old in 1st grade. And it's for real up in here in quarantine. Like it is not a joke at all. And actually, my son is actually spectrum. So he's like very high functioning autism, and he's great, but like he has different needs, like he can't approach school the same way that other kids do. That's a whole pile-on. It's really fun. I'm having the best time
ever. So if you guys are wondering why I'm having someone like Brooke on, when normally I just, generally have people from the adult industry on, I'm trying to expand my guest repertoire. I really want to have more educators on, just people who talk about sex in different ways. And I thought Brooke was, a great opportunity for that. But also, this is the perfect time for me to make my big announcement, which I feel like probably a lot of you have sort of guessed by now. I'm pregnant. And I am 14 weeks, and I am due in mid-October. So that's it's a pretty crazy, life-changing situation. So when Brooke's publicist actually approached me, I was like, what a perfect time to not only have somebody on that kind of just brings some more diversity and variety to my show, but also like what a perfect opportunity for me to utilize your time to ask you all the questions that I have as a, coming up new mother. So
fire away, girl. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Buckle up.
It's kind of crazy. So I am 41, and I honestly, I grew up always thinking that I wanted kids. And then I don't know, like I was married for a while, and then we got divorced. And I think when that marriage ended, I kind of came to this conclusion that maybe like kids weren't in the cards for me, because I don't know, like this whole idea that I always had that like I was going to have children kind of felt different to me after that divorce. So I got, I met somebody else, my current husband, and, he's amazing and we have such a great life together. But I think by the time we got together, I was in this fear of being too old to have kids. Cause you know how they say like
Yeah,
after
totally.
like 30 or 35, it becomes more difficult. And I'd never been pregnant before. So I think, people would ask like, are you trying? And I would say we're not trying. We would,
Like,
what I
it's so
would,
annoying when people ask that question.
especially
Like,
when it's your mother,
oh,
like all the
like,
time.
so gross, mom. You know how babies are made. Don't ask me that question. Like, so gross.
Yeah, so I think I didn't want to try because then I might fail. And if
Yeah,
I
for
failed,
sure.
that would be really disappointing. So I thought if I don't ever really try, then I won't fail. So my husband plays hockey. So basically what we did was we just removed the goalie from the
Pull the
net.
goalie. Pull the goalie.
And we're just like, we'll see what happens. And like we did that a couple years ago. And yeah, I conceived in January, so it's really exciting and kind of
Super
unexpected, but
exciting.
we're so thrilled.
That's
We're so
amazing.
thrilled.
And we were saying off camera that you feel great, which
Yes, I've been
bows down to you, girl.
super
Bows
lucky. I've
down.
had zero morning sickness. I do feel tired at times, like more tired at times. I definitely go to bed earlier. One thing that does kind of plague me a little bit is that I tend to get like itchy if I don't wear really soft clothes. I'm a
Mm.
lot more sensitive to
Hmm.
fabrics, and sometimes my legs get kind of achy at night if I'm trying to sleep. But besides that, I feel fine.
That's
So
awesome. I wish you
yeah.
nothing but continuation of
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. And so I find myself in this situation that I know a lot of people in my industry are in where how do you, because I work in the adult industry and my business is around sex and I'm going to have a child and I personally feel fairly confident in raising my child and continuing to work in this industry just because my mom she was, she raised me in this industry. That's how I got in this thing was my
Right.
parents. So, I come from a long line of pornographers. um, so I'm not
Deep
really worried.
history.
Yeah. So I'm not really, terribly worried about that. But, there are those questions of like, when do you talk to your kids about sex?
Yeah.
And I think what you specialize in and the idea of losing my sexual identity in becoming a mother. So maybe tell me a little bit about your journey and why you got into, what you do and was there like a tipping point that made you realize
Yeah.
that you needed to help other people with this?
There was totally a tipping point. I mean, I had this like really great, very Carrie Bradshaw life in New York City. I worked at Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and InStyle, and I was like the girl catching cabs with my arm up, and my Jimmy Choos. Like I had this really fabulous life. And then I became a mom and I lived in the suburbs, and I was like, this is not at all what I signed up for. And by the time I had my second, I got slammed with like very severe postpartum depression, like
Mm.
suicidal. It was horrible.
That
And
scares me. I've heard a lot about that. So you didn't have it with your first one, but you
I
had it with
had
your
what's
second.
called postpartum anxiety, PPA,
Okay.
which is much less known. And it was like retroactively diagnosed, right? So like in hindsight, it became clear that's what I had. But when I had my son, I was just like slayed. And so my like postpartum recovery, meaning like that whole year, because you really need like a year, was just pretty terrible. And I was just like, you know what? I'm on pills, which I got no shame in that game. I'm in therapy, like things are good, but I'm going to take it to the next level and I need to feel good about myself. And this is no judgment on anyone else and how they view themselves, but I wanted to lose weight. Like I wanted to look like how I did before kids. So I did that and I was feeling really good about myself. And so by 6 months later, I did a boudoir photo shoot. And the thing about boudoir is everyone thinks they're doing it for their partner, but they're actually doing it for themselves, right? Like it's this
Yeah.
entirely empowering situation. And I was
I've done a couple of those. So I know
right?
exactly.
Like you just feel so badass, like when you're
Yeah.
doing it, you think you're going to be nervous, but then you wind up being this like phoenix rising. And it's like this crazy thing. And so I was sitting there with like, Bridget Bardot hair and garters and like stilettos. And I was like, I am so fucking sexy. Like this is cray cray. And I went home and I had the most amazing sex with my husband ever. No toys at that point. And so I started to like harness that side of myself. I started to flirt with my husband more. I started to wear more lingerie. And I was like, it was like this feeding cycle, like this snowballing thing. And so a couple months later, my husband brought home a cock ring. We had never used toys before. And he brings home the Juju Mio cock ring, which like comes in this gorgeous box and it's so classy and so beautiful. So we have sex with this thing. And sex before the cock ring was literally like analog television. Like that, and then sex with the cock ring was like IMAX 4D, Star Wars, lightsabers in your face. I was like, what were we having before? Because if this is what sex is, I want to have it all the time. Like,
can you explain the difference? Like,
it took me a lot longer to orgasm. Like it was like a total crapshoot. Like maybe every 30 times I would come. I realized that I was doing it for his pleasure really and not for mine. Like I wasn't getting even half out of it as what he was. And then I would get like resentful. And then I found myself like just trying to finish him so that it could be over. Right.
Oh yeah,
and then,
I think all women know what that's
we've
like.
all done that, and I'm faking it, and like sometimes it would be lovely, but more often than not, it was like wah, wah, And so then when I had sex with this cock ring, which essentially is vibrating, and it has this huge head, and so it hits up against your clit every time you guys are connecting, and all of a sudden I was like, oh shit. This is way better than my finger, right, on my clit. And I had like 4 orgasms, like real deep, crazy orgasms from penetration. And I'm not a G-spot girl, right? Like I'm a clit girl. And so this was mind blowing. I felt closer to my husband. I was like, wow, okay, I can come from sex. This is amazing. Like I found a tool. And so what wound up happening is I went to like a mommy and me class where I had all my mom friends. And like, I'm the person who like, just like, I don't care. So like, I just say stuff like, and I'm also the type of person who could turn anything sexual. Like you could be like, I had a yogurt today. And I'd be like, was it drippy? Like I can make anything sexual. So I go to mommy and me with like all my little mom friends. And I'm like, do you know about this cock ring? Do you know about this thing? And like, we're shaking maracas, like with our babies. And I'm like, it's amazing. Like you come 4 times. Like, and I'm going like that. And they all bought it. They all went online and they bought it just like you would if your girlfriend said, I found this amazing mascara or this, amazing lipstick.
Right.
And they all came back and were like, oh, that was amazing, And so, and they started to have sex with their husbands more and they had like a little like shaking their hips. And I saw their lives turn around, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that there was an underserved market here, that moms weren't having this conversation about how hard this is. And moms didn't know what the solutions were. And they didn't want a porn star to tell them. They didn't want to take recommendations from a porn star. They wanted to take recommendations for someone who was living the same like joy and nightmare. Right. So,
right.
That's what I started.
Somebody that could relate to the position that they were in.
Correct.
Because I mean, to be fair, like porn stars live in a world of sex. Their job is sex. So like, that's everything they do. As a mom, like your job is like your child and whatever else you do.
Correct. And it's just the challenges. There's so much emotion that comes with being a mom. It is like the best and the worst, right? Like you just have so much emotion tied up in it. Like here's this human that like you've never cared about anything in your life more than this human, but it has robbed you of a lot of things, right? So the challenges are different than a single person or just a married person or a coupled person. And the truth is, if you're not living that life, if you're not in that and understand that you're going to get cock blocked by stomach flu, like that somebody's going to like walk in on you and you're going to have some weird explanation, or that you literally have 3 minutes to have sex, like you're not, you need someone to trust, right? Like you just need someone to trust. And these moms trust me, which is everything.
Fantastic.
And I don't take that lightly, like at all. Because
Right.
this is vulnerable. This is really vulnerable stuff.
Yeah. So, do you ever come across women who feel like any guilt exploring the side of themselves? Like, as a mom,
yes.
do you have that idea that you feel like you have to give everything, your whole life, every part of your being to your child and being a mom, and that like even taking a small sliver of your life for yourself and for sex is something that like should be shamed? Do you experience that?
Oh my God. I mean, that's why I say you can be both things, right? It's this Mary, and the whore kind of like complex that happens. And a lot of times when women become moms, they think they can no longer be sexy because that is slutty and whorish, right? Like that part of themselves is dead because it's inappropriate. Like it's not okay. Society is going to scarlet letter them and they're going to be labeled and they're like, it's just that part's done. And now I am just Mother Teresa, like now I am just kindergarten teacher for everybody all the time. And that happens a lot. And some of the things I hear the most are, I used to be. I used to be. But now I can't. Used to be and can't. Or no longer. Like those are the two words. And so it's about bringing women back into the idea that like you are multidimensional. Like you're not just one thing, but you have to work for it. Like to your point that there's guilt in taking, there's so much conversation in the mommy zeitgeist about self-care. Take time for your manicure, take time for your yoga, take time for a bath. Like there's so much of that and it's all true. Sex needs to be lumped into that. Like you need to add sex to that, I believe, whether with yourself or a partner, like, or orgasm needs to be added to that, right? Like I think you need to add orgasm to that.
Yeah.
But there is a ton of guilt. Because you've got a kid being like, Mommy, I miss you. Mommy, don't go. Mommy, and you're like, heart's dying. But we have to do it. And so I try to help women not have shame, not have guilt. And so I try to live my life a little bit more out loud because I try to be an example, right? Like I try to, well, look at me. You don't have a problem with me doing it. So why do you have a problem with you doing it? It's okay. Like I give you permission. You know what moms need? We need permission. Like we need permission to be more than just a mom. So I hope I give that to other moms.
I think this also like kind of leans into a problem that a lot of women face that, we can only be one thing and we can't be multidimensional. This is something that we explore in a different way a lot in the conversations that I have with porn stars, where they're like, well, I can only be a sexual person. I can't also be like an intellectual person. I can't also be a creative person. Like society will only let me be this one thing. And then they're like, okay, she's a porn star. She's a whore. Like nothing she says matters. Her opinion doesn't matter.
Right.
That kind of thing. And so I see when you're saying this, that the same kind of dynamic is being lent to mothers, but obviously in a completely different way. Like you're a mom and that's all you are. And that's your entire life's purpose. And that's the only thing that should matter to you. When I think that it sends a much healthier message to your children, if that's the one thing that you're really concerned about as a mother, which I assume one is, that loving yourself and taking time for yourself and valuing yourself and all these other dimensions of yourself is a good thing to make you a well-rounded person and a happy person. And I think that's a great message to give your children.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my older one, my 10-year-old is a girl, and she is keen on this, right? Like she's seen over the past 6 years when I started to become like very verbal and sort of my own activist about taking time for myself, like breaks, and mommy and daddy are having date night, and like, no, our door is closed right now, you may not come in, you are not invited, like all of these things. No, you may not come with me for my manicure, like making all these hard lines. Now that she's entering sort of her preteen years, she is asking for her own privacy and her own timeouts and like her own breaks. And I give them to her very freely. And like, it's kind of like she understands now why I was doing that and has more empathy about it. And so I think I've given her a good lesson, like
Yeah.
that is an example I want to set. And yeah, I mean, I imagine porn stars have the same sort of thing. I mean, it's just unfair society wise to label anyone as one thing. Like, none of
Right.
us are like that. Sex is particularly polarizing, as you know. It is
Mm.
particularly, filled with, judgment and shame and all of these things. And, I see my job as helping women be more, right? To be more than just that one person, but show them how in a way that is not shameful, right? Because like what I'll say is I think people have this idea of, well, if I'm going to be a sexy mom, then I'm going to roll up to drop off in my, high heels and my short skirt and like my boobs sticking out. Like that's not what I'm saying. I mean, if that's how you roll, great. But like, that's not what I'm saying. Like it's
Mhm.
okay to show up looking homeless to drop off. If
Yeah.
and look hot on your date with your partner, like that's okay. Those two women exist. Like, let's just let the second one out of the closet. Like
Right.
she's there, let's just let them out. And so I try to let women know, like, I'm not saying that you need to be, making out with your husband at the family barbecue. Like that's not like what I'm suggesting. But, maybe send him a flirty text while you're there that no one else can see and sort of get primed for when the kids go to bed that night. Like those types of things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I wonder if, I mean, obviously, I'm sure that you've helped a lot of women who have thanked you for the inspiration that you've given them. But I wonder if, are you thanked a lot by the husbands?
So this is my favorite thing ever. My favorite thing ever is to talk to husbands. Like
Yeah.
I like want to just be invited to as many like men retreats or like male things like as humanly possible to like give
Hmm.
speeches because it is the best thing ever. First of all, men will tell their wives spend as much money with her as you want, like as many sex toys as you want to buy, like there's no limit. Like here's my credit card. um, and they also I don't know that they thank me. I mean, they do thank me for sure, but I think what they thank me for is the ability to have the conversation. You know,
Mm,
thank you for having that conversation with my wife. Thank you for having that conversation. Thank you for telling me how my wife feels. Thank you for
mm,
explaining what I'm doing wrong or like why what I'm doing isn't working. Because there's
hmm.
always like an emotional reason for a woman why that's not working, like for a mom, and the guys
Hmm.
just don't see it that way. So yeah, I get thanked by them a lot. But I think more than educating moms, I probably educate the husbands more
Mm,
because they're like just so out of touch with what's happening, you know?
right.
So it's more about educating them. And then once they apply it or their wife's applying what I've said, then like, yeah. So it's like funny joke in our family that, most date nights are on Saturdays, like for most, moms and married
Mhm.
couples, like whatever. So if I'm giving someone advice, like this is how you should roll a date night, or they're starting to use a brand new toy that I recommended or whatever, Sunday morning, like my phone will blow up with my clients. Like, that was the best date night ever. Oh my God, I had the craziest orgasm. Or like the husband's texting me, and my husband, who hates it when I use my phone, which is comedy considering I like run a social media channel. But
Right.
he's like, it's hilarious. He's like, is your phone blowing up from date night? I'm like, yeah. Like, it's like a
So like
joke.
Sunday's like one of those days where all that feedback's just like
Yeah,
rolling in for you.
totally. And my DMs, like, and my
Mm,
Instagram DMs.
yeah.
Those get full of love letters over the weekend for sure. For sure.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to take a quick commercial break and we're going to come back. We'll talk a little bit more about what moms can do to feel sexy, what I can do to feel sexy, because I don't, and
You
so much
won't
more.
for a
So
while.
hang out, guys. We'll be right back. If you're here, it's probably because you're a fan of my podcast, Holly Randall Unfiltered. Well, that's great because I'm a fan of my podcast too. Now, if you don't know what Patreon is, it's a crowdfunding platform that allows people to make contributions on a monthly basis. Because this podcast costs money to make, maybe even more so than others. I'm obsessed with quality, so since the beginning, I have always recorded in a studio, had a professional sound engineer, and recorded professional video. All of these things cost money, as you can imagine. And I also made a pretty scary decision this year to cut down on my directing gigs so that I could focus more on this podcast, which is why I need your help now more than ever. But don't worry, I'm not asking you to give me something for nothing. In exchange for your contributions, I offer so many perks. For example, access to the live streams of all of my interviews, a bonus podcast that I do called My LA Porn Life, Q&As where the stars answer your specific questions, behind the scenes interviews, merchandise such as mugs, shirts, and stickers, access to my private Snapchat, and so much more. You can join for as little as $5 a month and help me change the way the world sees the adult industry and sex work. So take a look around and see everything that I have to offer. I really hope that you'll join and be a part of our little community. All right, so we're back. So I do, can I ask you a little bit more about postpartum depression? Because you kind of touched on that. And I mentioned to you earlier that that is something I'm pretty fearful of. I find that I am a pretty even keel person. I don't have like a lot of crazy mood swings. Even now, like with all the hormonal changes that are happening, I'm still like pretty even. I don't take anything. But I'm concerned because I've heard from people like strangely enough, my sister-in-law is also pregnant and she's due like in a month. And one of her best friends, who's same as me, is like pretty even temperament, most of the time, pretty like happy. She had a kid and had like insane postpartum depression, like suicidal, like that kind of thing. So it just seems like such an incredibly foreign thing to happen to you. And what a bizarre biological like result of having a child. Like, how does that work in the theory of evolution where like you have a child, you're procreating, you're continuing the human race, and you need to like take care of this thing and you just like want to die. Like, what the fuck?
I've never honestly thought of it that way, but hashtag, like, you nailed it. Like, yes, like, why? It's like an appendix. Why? Like, why do you exist? Like, it doesn't make sense. I'm a truth teller. Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm going to say. I pray for you that it does not happen. But I rightfully scared. It's scary. I think the benefit now is that there's a lot of conversation about it. There are a lot more resources. There's a lot more awareness. When I got it almost 7 years ago, nobody talked about it. I didn't even know, like, it wasn't even like really labeled, like I kind of knew maybe it was going to happen, but I wasn't sure. It was an out of body experience. It's like, I didn't even know who I was. And I didn't want to I didn't want to harm my child or my children in any way. Right. I just wanted to leave, but like leave this earth, like leave it all. Like I just wanted darkness. And so I would sit in closets because it was dark. Like, and I just wanted to like close it down. I wanted to take my passport and just go to the airport and like pick like Marrakesh. Like, how far from here can I go? And it was really scary because this wasn't who I was. I didn't have diagnosed depression. I didn't have like, I thought too, I was a really happy person. Like I had a really great life and I was um what I thought was normal. But I knew by the time I came home with him that this was very wrong. Like I knew something was very, very wrong.
So it
Um,
was like instant.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was instant with my daughter too. Like it was a
Mm.
lot of like, what I just couldn't stop worrying. I was like, I just couldn't stop. I couldn't handle it. Like you have triggers. It tends to be when you have postpartum depression, you have triggers, right? Like something that
Mhm.
will really dive you in. And crying was a trigger for me. Now, babies cry, they cry nonstop, they cry
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the time. And it's a cruel world that your postpartum peaks at 6 weeks, which is also when baby's fussiness peaks. So you've got like two things happening concurrently that do not help each other at all, which is tough. And that's when my friends found me, um, throwing up from anxiety and in a dark corner while my baby was crying. And they found me and immediately called my doctor and they called my husband. And here's the crazy part. Like they need to assess whether you need to go to the hospital, emergency room and all this stuff. And never forget, my best friend from childhood calls my husband and says, we have like a big problem here. I've already called her OB, blah, blah, blah. And my husband says, what are you talking about?
He had no idea.
No.
Wow.
Like he knew I was having a hard time, but he just thought like, well, everyone has a hard time with a newborn. Like, and he was great. Like I breastfed, so we couldn't feed him, but like he would change diapers and like rock him. And like, so I think he thought like, well, I'm helping a ton. She's just like, it's just hard.
Yeah.
And that for me was a huge moment because I was like, I really am totally alone. Like
Hmm.
in this, I am totally alone. And
Hmm.
from that point on, there was no choice. I had to be medicated. There was no choice. I was non-functioning. I was
Hmm.
non-functioning.
Yeah.
So I had to go on medication to save my own life. I mean, I
Hmm.
knew how I was going to kill myself. I was going to run my car into a tree when my kids were home with my husband. Like I knew how I was doing all of it, but it's this horrible fog that creeps in. It's like, that's the only way I can describe it. It like, sort of like gathers and then starts to fill and you can see it coming and you're like, fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. And some women get it and some women don't. And they have no idea why. It's like
Mm.
playing craps. Like you have no idea. But all I tell women is you have to raise your hand. The second you feel like something's not right, like I don't have a connection to my baby, I'm crying all the fucking time, don't want to get out of bed, like, whatever they are, you have to raise your hand. Like you have to say, if you don't want to tell your husband, call your OB. Like you have to say, I'm not okay. I'm
Hmm.
not okay. Because there's so much pressure on new moms to be like, I got this. Look, I got my baby body back in 6 weeks and I'm doing an Us Weekly cover. Like, and I'm totally great. And I'm like out in my chaser sweatpants, like at the farmer's market, like with my baby. Isn't this so great? Don't my highlights look good? And you're like dying in a corner, like there's this
Yeah.
horribly unrealistic expectation. And so that's why I always tell women, like, raise your hand because it's not weird that you are struggling. You should be struggling. This is hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do have to say, along with all the other societal pressures that we as women face to be like beautiful all the time and perfect and able to juggle a career and, a perfect
So
fit body and a great diet and exercise regime, it makes me crazy when I see those magazine articles like in the US where it's like, so and so 6 weeks after a
oh my
baby, like
God.
Heidi Klum
I
looking
can't.
perfect. I'm like,
I
fuck you,
can't.
bitch.
Fuck you
Like I've
all.
already
You are
gained,
the
I'm like,
problem. You are the
yeah, it's
problem.
so frustrating because I'm like,
Problem.
I mean, I've already accepted the fact that I'm going to be like enormous. I mean, I've already put on like almost 12 pounds and I'm only like 15 weeks.
A lot of it's water.
So,
Don't worry. Not
so
baby. It's
that
water.
is a huge that is a huge fear for me.
I
And
get it.
actually, along those lines too, it's so weird because I look in the mirror and obviously I see my stomach growing, and I still, because I've been so, critical of myself and my body my whole life. I think also, especially working in the industry too, where I shoot like perfectly naked, beautiful women,
Right.
probably doesn't help all
I
that much.
know.
So, so when I look at myself in the mirror and I see my belly growing, I still can't get rid of that thought that, oh, you're getting fat. You're getting
Correct.
fat. Look at you. You're fat. You're fat. Like it's so, and it's like, no, it's a baby. And it wasn't until I got my ultrasound and I saw a child in there that it like, that I almost kind of got it, because even though I knew I was pregnant, I had all the signs, the test said yes, I still like couldn't make that connection. I just felt like I was getting fat, but I still struggle with that so much.
I think it's bullshit if you don't. I think
Yeah.
people are lying who said that they aren't. I was a fat kid. I have so much body dysmorphia, and like um I just I look in the mirror, I can be my fucking thinnest, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I'm a size whatever. Like
Mhm.
I just, there is not a day goes by where I don't think about my weight and how I look and all of those things. And being pregnant was horrifying. Like being
Yeah.
pregnant, like I do not have a picture of me pregnant. I was pregnant for 18 months of my life, and I do not have a picture of myself. Like, I
That's
just couldn't do it. Um, which is sad. Like, I should have been able to like love but I just don't, I just, it doesn't work for me. This whole concept of like, love your body and you're glowing and you're this. No, I was a horse. I sweat. I was not glowing. Like it was just disgusting. I got fat in places I didn't even know. Like I was not a cute pregnant lady. I was not a basketball. Like I just, and you know how like it was so horrible. Do you know how people say like if you're a basketball, you're having a boy, but if you like spread out, you're having a girl? Have you ever heard that wives' tale?
no, I haven't. I've heard like if you carry high, it's one, and if you carry
Right.
low, it's
Okay.
the
So like
other. I've heard that.
essentially the same thing, except this is so misogynistic that like you basically are ugly if you're carrying a girl and you're like adorable if you're carrying a boy. It's
Oh
like so
God.
misogynistic. But
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was having with both of my pregnancies. And on my both pregnancies, everyone was like, it's a girl. It's totally a girl.
And so in your head, you're thinking like that means
Yeah,
I'm
that means I'm
ugly.
ugly and fat. Go fuck yourselves. And that's why losing weight was a huge part of my recovery, like a
Mm,
huge part, because I
yeah.
needed to not feel that way anymore. I needed to not, I identified the weight with unhappiness,
Hmm.
and I needed to
Hmm.
break that up. I think.
I that it's interesting that you say that, because I see so much of this. I almost wonder if we should sometimes recognize that for some people, like having a certain weight is really just what's going to get you to the point where you're going to be happy with yourself. And obviously, we're talking about like a reasonable weight,
Yeah, of course.
not something overly skinny. But there's all this push out there because there are heavier women who are getting a lot more press, and they're saying like, I love my body the way it is. I love my body the way it is, which is amazing. Like
Amazing.
I admire those women so much. There's this performer in our industry named Carla Lane, who's a BBW performer, and she is so confident and she loves her body, and she's just like, and I envy her so much.
Envy
I
women like that. I'm like, can I drink some of what you are, the Kool-Aid?
It's
Because
it's so funny,
I
right? It's like I
I
envy the skinny
can't.
women with the perfect bodies, and then I envy the large women who love their bodies.
We're fucked either way. We're basically
Yeah,
fucked
right.
either way. Is what
Right. So
that
I
is.
think for someone like me, because it sounds like that's what it's like for you, like I need to be like a certain healthy weight in order for me to feel good about myself. I don't know if I will ever have that mental fortitude to accept and love myself as like a bigger size. So how did
I
you make that journey for that weight loss, and how did that change things for you? And can you kind of tell me a little bit about
Yeah,
your
of
journey
course.
that got you to the place where you are now?
I I went to see a nutritionist who, in all
Mm.
honesty, is like a militant commander. She's like, no, this is not like your LA, like, let's eat oat milk and, put, whatever. Yeah. In your coffee, like, that's not what this was. This was like, this is how many calories you can eat. Don't mess it up. And so I wound up, and I never really lived my life that way. And so I wound up eating as many calories as she told me. And I wound up losing weight. And I actually wound up losing more weight than I had ever. I think I was like maybe even thinner than my wedding. And now when I look back at pictures of myself, I'm like, damn, she was skinny. I was skinny. And then it just wasn't sustainable. Like what you were saying before, like that's
Right.
just not, it wasn't a sustainable weight. And so, I've had to sort of play with it of like, I'm a mom. I need to drink. It's very important to my mental health to cocktail all the time.
Right.
Um, so, like, how do I reconcile those things so that I can, indulge and get that, like, dopamine hit or whatever the chemical release is from like chocolate and food and alcohol, and also maintain myself as a certain way. So
Mm.
I fluctuate. I mean, I fluctuate between like 10 pounds, but, um, you know, I dream of the day when I can give myself body grace. I
Mm.
dream of the day. And I have a daughter. So, like, I am so conscious about not speaking negatively about myself in front of her, even though I think it. I will never do
Mm.
it. And the only thing I can say, and my mom did, and it's not her fault, and she did the best she could, and like, blah, blah, blah.
It's also a different time back then. I
It was
think,
totally a different.
only now we've come to realize like how important loving ourselves as we are is, and the messages that we send our
Yeah,
children
and
and
how
what we talk about
detrimental they can be,
ourselves.
like how one
Yeah.
comment can like fuck your whole life. And so,
Hmm.
my daughter, who's not a skinny mini, is the most confident badass girl ever. And I'm like,
Mm.
well, at least I'm doing something right there. Like at least
Hmm.
I'm like breaking the cycle on her. But I did this whole piece on I wrote this whole piece and I've done a podcast on it about I had a C-section, I had two,
Hmm.
and my C-section scar. And there's this whole movement about love your scars, they're your badges of honor, and I believe that. It's just I don't really believe it for myself. Like I can
Hmm.
feel those two things at the same time because every time I look at my C-section scar, I feel like a mother. And
Mm.
most of the time when I see it, it's like in a sexual capacity, right? Like I'm naked or whatever. And that's the last place
Right.
I want to feel like a mom. That's the last place
Right.
I want to be reminded of my mothering.
Hmm.
And so every time I look at it, I know I'm supposed to look at it and go like, oh, my angels came from there and how blessed I am. And I am. Like there's all this apology that goes with it, motherhood, right? Like there's just
Hmm.
all this apology. And so like I am, but when I look at it, I hate it. I fucking hate it. It creates
Hmm.
like a Grand Canyon on my stomach where like the pooch is there. Even if I do 85 planks, like it's always going to be there. I hate it. And that's just like, it's shitty. Our bodies change. Like, and I want to get to a place of grace and self-acceptance, but it's hard. That's a lot of mental work. A lot of
You,
mental work.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I feel, and I don't know, maybe this is this perpetual guilt that like we always feel for not achieving like what we should be achieving. It's like the guilt that you feel for not achieving like that perfect post baby body,
Oh,
but then also it's a new kind of guilt, a new guilt for not loving yourself the way you are and seeing your C-section as your
correct.
badge of honor. And it's like, it's
It's
just
so
like we can
confusing.
never do
It's like,
anything
which camp
right.
are
Yeah.
you in? And it's like,
Right.
it's so frustrating. It is so frustrating. It drives me insane. And that's why I talk about it. Because I'm like,
Mm.
this is unpopular. I hate my C-section scar. This is very unpopular to say this, but I hate
Yeah.
it. Because you
Yeah.
know what? When I did that, when I put it out there and when I did my podcast, I got so many responses from women being
Hmm.
like, thank you for saying that. I fucking hate mine too. But I was like too scared to say it because people would say I'm like, not grateful. And I was like, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I see myself as like the person who says what we all think, but are too afraid to say. I'm the one who can make yogurt
Right.
sexual, and I am the one who can talk about cock rings at mommy and me. And I'm the one who can say the stuff that we're all scared to say.
All right. So I'm a new mother. Let's say that I've had my child, And it's been, a couple months. I've gotten through like the first initial months of, having a baby and all of the drama that comes with that. I've heard horror stories from so many girlfriends, which has made me absolutely terrified, but
Yeah,
we'll just
I hear
we'll
you.
see how that goes. Uh, and I'm just feeling really unsexy. I don't want to have sex with my husband. My husband doesn't appear to want to have sex with me. The only thing that we ever do is talk about the kids. I feel sluggish. I feel lumpy. What would be maybe some of the initial steps or advice that you would give a new mother coming to you who really wants to start to change her life and how she feels about herself?
Before I answer that question, I just need to talk about the word lumpy and how no one has ever used that word to describe like new motherhood, but it is so perfect. Like that is, I'm feeling it like lumpy. Yes, you feel your body feels lumpy. That is like so perfect. I love it. Um, well, I really talk about a couple of very easy ways that you can sort of reharness your sexiness. Some of them are popular, some of them are unpopular, but they are all really easy and they don't take a lot of time, which is what a new mom needs. So the first thing I tell moms is please just try to pull your shit together visually 20% of your week. Just 20.
Okay.
Look
20%. Okay.
look like garbage 80% of the time. But
Mom
20%.
drop off, you can still look homeless.
Totally. Like totally. But 2 times a week, it can even be for 2 hours. I don't care. Put on some mascara, deodorant, and a shirt that makes you feel good. And maybe the lipstick you used to buy, and find a really cute way to wear dirty hair. But like pull it together 2 times just so you can feel human, right?
Mm.
It will have a huge effect on yourself. um Actually, coronavirus time is like that, right? Like I've been feeling so disgusting and so gross because I'm like home all the time and I don't put makeup on. And then, today I put makeup on, and then I'm Jewish, so we celebrated Passover and I got dressed up and I was like, huh, I felt like Batman had like got back into his like costume, I was like, oh, she's back. This is amazing, And so I tell women to do that. I think it's really, really important. Make that effort. The second thing I will say is you have to initiate flirting with your husband. You just have to. And frankly, I think you should flirt with everyone. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and have extracurricular activities if that's not in your agreement. But what I mean by that is sexiness is just energy. It's just good, confident energy. And if you can get yourself together 20% of the time, and if you can do that when you're out, like just smile at the Starbucks guy, like just a dad, like be like, hey, like it's just energy that you can then take back home and then apply to your partner, right? And sexy texting is so fucking easy. I mean, you can have a kid attached to your boob and send a really sexy, racy text to your partner. Like that's not a lot of effort, but it has a huge payoff. It like, even if you can't be physically intimate, you're becoming sexually intimate in a non-physical way, right? Like you're having that connection again. And like I said about energy, he's going to give you, or she's going to give you the feedback back. And that's going to feel really good. And that's going to sort of get your flames going again and be like, oh, right, I can do this. I can be sexy and breastfeed, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say. And then the other thing I would say is that, and this is where women don't like me very much, but I do think that women should try, even when you're postpartum, to wear something sexy in the bedroom. And here's why. Men's arousal, and you probably know this, is tied to visual stimulation. It's how they're wired. It's biological, right?
Yep.
It's why they love the porn stars, right? Because they like look perfect and perky and, all of those things. That's how they get off. That's what turns them on. And when you walk into a room wearing something sexy, it could just be a nice bra and underwear. Like, I'm not saying you have to like get all the straps out. It could just be a nice bra and underwear. His face, like in his eye, it's the Snapchat filter, like the Instagram
Mhm.
filter where it's like, blah, 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 like all
Yeah.
of a sudden you've got no flaws. He does not see the milk stain. He does not see your C-section scar. He doesn't even know what back fat is. Ask him. He has no idea. Like he just sees a beautiful woman in front of him who wants to have sex. And he's like,
Mhm.
yes, yes. And so what I say to women is like, enjoy that. Like take that in. Believe him when he admires you and when he
Yeah.
desires you. Believe him because there's
I think
nothing better than being desired.
Yeah,
There
and I think
isn't.
that's a hard thing for women too, we're self-critical because
Yes,
yeah, even when my husband will say to me like, "Oh, you look really nice." I'll be like, "Ugh,
of
no, I
course.
don't.
No, I
Like,
don't.
I
Did
don't
you see
believe
this?
you." And then
Like, oh my God.
they're just like, "Well, why should I pay you a compliment if you just like shut me down every time?"
Exactly. Exactly. And my husband will even say to me sometimes, like, well, isn't it nice that I like your body so much? Like, wouldn't you prefer me to like your body so much? Like, would you
Yeah.
prefer me
Yeah.
not to? Because I'm always like, no, whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but I want to love my body. It's hard to believe you. Hard to believe
Mhm.
you. And so I
Mhm.
have to practice the same thing I preach, right? Like I have to
Right.
remind myself to do that. And it just, so I'll put on lingerie one night and I'll be like, oh, okay. Like he thinks I'm the hottest thing ever. And it's so important to do that when you feel like crap, right? Like when you feel
Mm.
like you're too big or you feel like you're that, he's going to love you anyway. If he's not a dick,
Right.
and if he doesn't, he's an asshole, you know?
Right.
So like he's just psyched you're there and and putting in effort. That actually
Mhm.
means something to him and he will give it back to you. So those are
Right.
like the three things. And by the way, that doesn't take a lot of effort either. I mean, to find like a matching bra and underwear set is like that literally took you 15 seconds to put on, or a teddy,
Mhm.
or baby
Mhm.
doll. Baby dolls are the best because they hide everything. Baby
Yeah.
dolls are like a postpartum's best friend. Your boobs are going to be huge. It hides all this crap. Baby dolls are the way to go.
It's so funny because my husband and I had like a sexy romantic night in a hotel room that we've been doing. This was before the quarantine. We would try to do like a date night where we'd like get like a nice hotel room and just get away for one night because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just like when you take yourself out of the environment of your
totally.
home, there's something very different about it. And I went and I bought some lingerie and I bought myself like a baby doll and I was already starting to show and he was just laughing. He was like, "You totally look like a hot mom." Like that, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
like he meant it in like a good way because it
yeah,
was a very like mom,
yeah.
you know,
I
kind of
mean,
outfit.
we have to face reality. And that's
Yeah.
like what I think is really important in these conversations is like, could we just be realistic? Because Us
Mm,
Weekly and that whole thing, it's not realistic. It's not.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so I want to be honest. This
Yeah.
sucks. You feel like shit. You've got 3 minutes. Like, let's just be real about this thing. Like, you are a mom. You are. Like, what else are you going to do? You know?
Yeah.
Um, you can't change what you can't change, right? But I think um, I think society is getting better about it. I think that we're becoming more accepting. I hope I'm like part of that, um, first brigade that's getting out there. And um, I think it's really important to have the conversations because every mom I know, once the conversation gets opened, goes, "Oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one."
Mhm.
And you're like, you are so not the only one. Like we're all here.
Right.
Like you got an
Right.
army behind you of people who feel like this, you know?
Right. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Brooke. I really appreciate it. I really do think that that honesty angle is so helpful because, we talked about so many different things about the guilt about not feeling this, looking this way, but then not feeling this way. And yeah, I just find it really helpful. And I can imagine that you're getting so much feedback from people who are like, finally, we've got somebody who's being honest. And and I think a lot of it is about allowing yourself to feel those feelings that may not be feelings you're proud of.
Yeah, for
Allowing yourself to
sure.
feel shitty, allowing yourself to not feel good about yourself, and recognizing that's okay and that's normal. And it's something you can move past.
Yeah, for sure. Name it. It's funny. Like in the elementary schools this year, when there was school, they had a whole like social feeling unit, like school wide. And one of the big hallmarks of it was name your feeling, right? Like they say, name your feeling, and then this is how you can mitigate it. And I think that that's so important, that we need to name our feelings, because we're just told to be like happy all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think for moms especially, it's really important to name your feeling, because once you do, you can fix it. Once you say it, you can fix it. I have no libido. I feel unsexy. Okay, how can we fix that? What can we
Right.
now do? You know,
Right. Yeah, because you can't solve the problem until you address and
until you
identify
name
it.
it, like name it, and then we
Right.
can solve it. So yeah, that's what I think for sure.
Fantastic. So can you let everybody know, plug all your pluggables, where can they find you? Tell us about your podcast, all that good stuff.
Totes. So you can find me on Instagram at the sexy as a mother. You can find my podcast, all the podcast places. Sexy as a mother. It's really fun. It's really honest. I am very self-deprecating. You'll love it. And then my online store is at lovingsex.com/SAAM, stands for sexy as a mother. And that's where I have like a very right and tight curated collection of the toys I think fit motherhood really well. So it's not 18,000 toys, it's probably 35. And so if I have it up there, you can have total confidence that I think it's awesome and that I think it's going to work. And I always tell people, if you have questions, if you don't know, because so many women don't, like they don't know what to do, you could always DM me on Instagram. It's a DM fest on Instagram. And my website is saamofficial.com. It stands for sexyasamother.com. So those are all the places. Those are all my places.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for
And you
having
guys
me.
can find me at Holly Randall on Instagram and on Twitter. Support the show by going to patreon.com/Holly Randall Unfiltered. Thank you guys for bearing with us and all my technical snafus during this quarantine time. I know a lot of my video didn't work. So we're going to be seeing a lot of Brooke, but that's okay. She's so lovely looking.
I put makeup on today.
You did. And that's a good thing, because it's probably going to be like 80% of your footage. Why did I even bother? Thank you guys so much. And thank you for your support. And I'll see you next week.